Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome back. Got some office hours tonight. All right, another quick quiz for you guys. Guess what I'm eating based off of the sound this time. This is going to be a tough one. It's not going to make much sound. Let's see if you can even hear this. This is going to be a really hard one. Actually, if you were watching last night, you know the answer. That's my hint. If you were watching last night, you know the answer. So tomato, no. Chips, no. Chips? Harry Potter fan? Does that sound like chips to you? No. Soup? No. Yogurt? No. Bread is the closest so far. Chef Boyardee ravioli. Very specific, but wrong. It's not Pizza Bites. What's up, Aria? It's not toast. Someone got it right, but they didn't. They said it in a comment, but they didn't actually address the question. Biscuits. This right here is a biscuit that I made last night. So if you were watching last night, you would have remembered that I was making biscuits. Anyway. How's everyone doing tonight? We got a quiz tomorrow or Friday, depending, and a exam tomorrow or Friday, depending on what class you're in. It's funny that, Joe, you were the only one that got it right. Or no, well, Shaky Boy, you got it right too, but Joe, you got it right. Even though you weren't answering the question directly. Those are some delicious biscuits. Ah, Yassine, what is up? What's the difference between photochemical smog and ground level ozone? On my study guide, I said that ground level ozone is formed through the reaction of nitric oxide and VOCs with sunlight and heat. Yes, so photochemical smog is one of the main pollutants of photochemical smog is ground level ozone. So, look at let's look at the equation. Photochemical smog equation. So, maybe I'll just pull up our slide that I have because I had it laid out there pretty easy. Hi, Ashi. What's up? So if you look at the equation here, you'll notice that when we talk about photochemical smog, it is the combination of ozone and what's known as nitric acid. So together, these make up photochemical smog. But on the opposite side of this, you have your primary pollutants. So photochemical smog, one component of it is ozone. Also, the hydrocarbons here is also a VOC. It's a type of VOC. volatile organic compound? Good question. Nathan, do we have a short answer? No. No short answer on the test. There will be a short answer on the test at the end of the unit, but today, or tomorrow rather, on the quiz, it's just multiple choice. Ankita, you are a Harry Potter fan 39. Okay. Maybe I'm trying to get your hearing checked. You think I'm eating chips. Or maybe I just eat soggy chips. Maybe I'm a weirdo. I am eating soggy chips over here. Arya, can I go over genetic drift? Sure. So genetic drift is essentially anytime the allele frequencies of a population change without any selection pressure. If there's no selection, but they still change, that's genetic drift. So it's a random changing of allele frequencies that often happens in smaller population sizes. So I've never looked up actually an image for genetic drift to see what they show. Let's take a look. How do they usually show genetic drift? These aren't really good diagrams, actually. I think these are trying to show examples of like how it could occur. So I guess what they're showing here, they're trying to say this is like genetic drift, probably because what you have is in your original population on the left, right? In the bottle over here on the left, you've got what looks like a variety of different characteristics or traits. You've got red and blue, and then you've got like red with 1 dot, and then you've got like a 1, 2, or 3 dots, or maybe even 5. So we can say that this is like a population of organisms on the left, in which you have a variation, right? A variation in traits. And then we can say over time, as you go from left to right in this diagram, what's up, dumb joke? How you doing? You end at a new population that is now all blue with no dots. So this is showing that this population is changing over time, but maybe it's just due to random chance, right? Like, so for example, it's just possible that the blue organisms with no dots in this population are the ones that reproduce more often than the others, but it's not because they have any necessary advantage. It's not like because they're being selected for or the others are being selected against. It's just random. And so the population evolves, but completely randomly, and you end up with a different population. I think that's the best way to explain genetic drift. It's sort of like a way to explain how allele frequencies could change in a population, regardless of natural selection from the environment. Nachos are soggy if you leave them for too long. Yeah, that's true. That is very true. What's up, Amina? How goes it? How many multiple choice questions are there? There is going to be a total of 14. It's actually a short quiz. 14 multiple choice questions. And it'll come in 2 parts. First part will have 6 questions, and the second part will have 8. 6 and 8. The Gizmo said that genetic drift decreases variation. Can I explain that concept? Well, yeah. So if you have a small enough population, like let's say like in this bottle here, right? This would be like a population of organisms. You can see that obviously the variation is decreasing, right? On the left, you have a lot more variation, a lot more differences. within the population. And then all the way over on the right, you have the exact same. It's a homogeneous population. Everything is the same. So the variation has decreased in this process. So typically what happens with genetic drift is that a small population slowly but surely like drifts. When I say drift, I mean like moves over towards drifts over towards one trait due to random events, like just randomness. It oftentimes is creating like one particular type of trait, right? So it's just moving in a direction where things are becoming more similar in the population. Anuva. Natural selection acts on phenotypes, but it changes both phenotypes and genotypes, right? Yeah, so the way to kind of think about it is, actually, let me go back to my paint. I was just doodling for a while on this, actually. This is my version of abstract art. Let me pull up hold on a second. So when you talk about like it acts on phenotypes but changes both phenotypes and genotypes, the most important thing to remember is that a phenotype, all that a phenotype is the expression of the genotype, right? So it's the genotype but expressed in a physical form. So I'm gonna save this. Save it to my desktop. That's good. Pretty art there. So if you have let's imagine a trait like like fur thickness. So you have an organism that has a certain thickness of fur. And like let's just say a simple example, as the environment gets colder, the fur thickness trait is selected by the environment, right? Natural selection is acting on the phenotype or the fur thickness. And over time, the fur becomes thicker and thicker because the underlying alleles are changing over time, and the alleles for thicker fur are becoming more and more common. So it's changing the frequency of the alleles, which are the genotypes of the organisms. But that results in a change in the phenotypes because genotypes lead to phenotypes. Hey, City Poo, what's up? How goes it? Mouse Pillow, assuming all four factors of VIST are satisfied, can primates similar to us in zoos become humans? Well, yeah. I mean, so if you're asking me if a chimpanzee in a zoo, if it had similar variation, and that variation was able to be inherited, passed on, the I part, and there was the same selection pressures on that primate as there was on humans through our evolutionary history, and there was enough time, would they turn into humans? Yeah, I mean, like, what else would happen? That's just the definition of evolution. You're basically saying that if you took a population of chimpanzees, well, the problem with that is a modern day population of chimpanzees is missing a lot of things that would be required for it to go in the direction of humans. Okay, so it's like, first of all, modern day chimpanzees are not the same as the primate ancestor that humans evolved from. So if you have, so you've got, let's just draw this out. So imagine you've got your chimps, right? And you've got your humans. Okay. We know that chimps and humans are relatively closely related. In fact, chimps are our closest living ancestor, are the closest living species in relationship to humans. But if you trace back our line, okay, so this is time. Okay, this is time. We have modern day. Modern day. Here is the common ancestor of chimps and humans. Now, a chimp and this common ancestor are not the same thing. Chimps are different than the common ancestor. They evolved away from this common ancestor just as humans did over time, right? There was different selection pressures on the route to humans as there were on the route to chimps. So chimps are the way they are today because they experienced different selection pressures on them over time, and humans are the way they are because they experienced selection pressures on them that led them to becoming the way they are today. Now, you're asking, is it possible for modern day chimps to somehow become humans? The answer is no, it is impossible. Let me put this in red. It is impossible because you have a false premise in your statement. Assuming all four vectors of this are satisfied, these chimps cannot have the same variation as this original group. So in order for chimps to become humans, they would literally have to have the exact same variation that existed in this original population down here. They would originally have to have the same level of inheritance of those traits, and then over time, over the millions and millions of years. By the way, this is about 6 million years. Then yes, if that was true, they would become humans because that's how humans evolved from this common ancestor. Anuva, also, how do antibiotics cause mutations? Antibiotics do not cause mutations. So let me just nip that in the bud. Antibiotics do not cause mutations. Antibiotics are the selection pressure in the environment that select the bacteria with the most beneficial mutations that occurred randomly already. So it's like the mutation occurs. Does that mutation make the bacteria more fit or less fit for its environment, aka more resistant or less resistant to the antibiotic? If it's more resistant, then the antibiotic would be selecting for that mutation because that bacteria would survive longer and be able to reproduce more and pass on that gene. So antibiotics do not cause mutations. Amina, on one of the review guides, it talked about single gene type versus polygenic. What are those? What's up, T-dubs? Yeah, let's talk about that real quick. Single gene versus polygenic. So let's pull up another paint here. Let's just do a new one. Okay, so you've got single gene and you've got polygenic. Single gene is essentially obviously trait that is determined by one gene. Whereas the polygenic is trait determined by two or more. Pretty simple, right? That's the gist, two or more genes. Now, when you think about like some examples, I think it's much easier to think of polygenic traits. So examples would be things like height, right? Height is not, there's not one gene that you get that makes you tall or short, right? There's not one gene where it's like, oh, there's the tall allele and there's the short allele, or there's the medium allele. No, in fact, there's like probably tens, if not hundreds of different genes that all determine small percentages of your height. And it's the accumulation of all of those genes that lead to determine your height, which is why height is on a spectrum, right? Height can go from like, you know, you have very short, right? On one extreme. And on the other extreme, you have very tall. And you can have anywhere in between, right? You could have any height in between the extremes. That's polygenic. Single gene would be a trait that's determined only by one gene, which means there's not as much potential to have a spectrum, right? So I'm trying to think of an example. I'm pretty sure, I think the easiest example is something like earlobe attachment, right? So I think, now I could be wrong on this, but it doesn't particularly matter if I'm wrong. At least it makes sense in terms of what a single gene trait. So like your earlobes, whether they are attached, so like on my ears, they're not attached. I have detached earlobes actually. So like my earlobes are detached. Some people's earlobes are actually connected, right, to the side of their face, or their head rather. So it's either you have attached, right? You have attached or detached. Oh man, am I spelling detached right? It looks terrible. Right, on one side or the other. It's an or. There's no spectrum in between. Because it's either you have the detached or the attached. If I look at if we just look at like a quick example here. All right, let's see. We look at examples of single gene. Yeah, see, earlobes comes up here. Yeah, earlobes. You have what they say, free earlobes or attached earlobes. What does this even look like? You guys ready to look at some ears? Here we go. Attached and detached. This is an example of a single gene. There's like nothing in between these two, right? Because it's only one gene and either you get the attached allele or you get the detached allele. And there's no in between. But with height, by the way, how weird do ears look? Just like how weird is this? Ears are weird, man. When you just see a bunch of ears lined up like that, it's kind of creepy looking. I don't have to go close up? All right, if I keep zooming in, what are your bets? Which ear does it zoom in on? Oh, no. Okay, so yeah, that's kind of the idea. You've got a very simple trait if it's a single gene trait. Ashi, what's up? For what Anuva said, is that natural selection? Is it that natural selection just acts on both genotypes? No, Ashi, natural selection acts on the phenotype. It acts on the phenotype. It does not act on the genotype, because the genotype is not something that is available to be acted on directly, right? Because the phenotype is what your genetics are, or what alleles you have. Those alleles determine your phenotype, which is then what the environment can act on directly, because it's what interacts with the environment, right? And so indirectly, it will change my genotype, which will then change the phenotype. Amina, what do I mean by determined by one gene? One regulating gene. I hope that explained as I went through that, I answered that question. If it's still confusing, feel free to let me know. What's the difference between homologous structures, analogous structures, divergent evolution, and convergent evolution? So maybe, let's see, maybe this will be a way to clear that up. All right, so if you've got, so the way I like to think about these four terms is that divergent evolution leads to, oopsie, homologous structures. All right. So we can label this arrow leads to. Whereas convergent evolution leads to analogous structures. So that's the relationship between the four terms. Yep, exactly, Nate. I don't know, Jamal. I don't know what is my words per minute on TypeRacer. I'm not a fast typer, though. It wouldn't be great. My typing skills aren't that good. So it'd probably be pretty poor. Aria, can I go over what genetic recombination is? Let's see. Nate, let's see. Genetic recombination is the exchange of genetic material between different organisms, which leads to production of offspring with combinations of traits that differ from those in either parent. Yeah, so genetic recombination is just is a fancy way of saying crossing over during meiosis. It's when the genes of one parent and the genes of the other parent kind of shuffle to make a random child. Ashi, for an organism to be deemed fit, is it that they have to have ideal traits, but also B, that they have to be able to pass those traits on? Fitness is all about B, all about being able to pass the traits on. So when you say ideal traits, an ideal trait is if a trait is passed on, that means it was ideal. It was good enough in that environment to work. So when we say an ideal trait, the only judgment of whether a trait is good or not is whether or not it is passed on to the next generation. So for example, like we might look at a tiger and be like, "Ooh, man, those fangs, what an ideal trait." Right? But the only way to really know if those fangs were ideal is if those fangs are being passed on to the next generation, because that means that the tiger was able to survive and reproduce. Now, is it possible for there to be some traits that are hurting the survival of an organism, but yet still get passed on because other traits make up for it? Sure. But if a trait gets passed on, that means it was good enough. It was not costly enough to impair the organism from surviving and reproducing. Right. So, I mean, that's all that evolution is, right? Evolution is just simply a matter of is an organism able to survive long enough to reproduce and pass its genes on? If the answer to that question is yes, that organism was successful. That organism was fit in an evolutionary sense, and its traits were good enough. That's all that evolution matters is, are they good enough? Are the traits good enough? Sure, Jamal. I can try it at the end of the stream. Yeah, or if there's a little bit of downtime, I'll try it. I'll jump on and see. Sanjay, can I go over immunity versus resistance? Immunity versus resistance? I mean, immunity versus resistance is very simply just, if you're immune to something, you literally can't, it doesn't affect you at all. Whereas if you're resistant to something, it means that maybe it affects you, but it doesn't affect you as strongly as it could otherwise. Like you have a slight resistance. It's kind of like saying, you know how some people say like, oh, my watch is waterproof versus my watch is water resistant. If you have a water resistant watch, that means water cannot damage it. You can dunk that thing in a pool, for an hour and it should be fine. But if a watch is water resistant, that means, yeah, if you drop it in the pool, it's probably going to be okay. But if you leave it there, maybe if you expose it long enough, it will damage it. So it's resistant, but not immune. That's sort of the difference between those two. Can I go over its process of speciation? Yeah, I mean, speciation is very simple to an extent, right? So speciation is the process which you have here. You have species A, right? And in species A, you have a population 1 and population 2, right? Both the same species, but two different populations. So if you have population 1 and now population 2, and they are reproductively isolated, meaning they are separated. So reproductive isolation. Over time, you may get something like species B and species C. Right? So the idea is that population 1 and population 2 are separated from each other so that they can no longer reproduce with each other. So they're isolated. And then as time marches forward, they evolve into different species. They change enough so that they are no longer the same species. T-Dub, this is, I mean, both, but it seems to me that whenever I do office hour streams, it's mostly bio questions. I think APE students are juniors and seniors, and they are, I don't know. They've got their own way of studying, I guess. They got it all taken care of. Thanks, Ashi and Nate, for answering questions in the chat. What up, Geez Louise? Bharati, how you doing, Bharati? Thanks for stopping in. Can I go over why genetic equilibrium is unlikely? Yeah, I mean, genetic equilibrium is this like ideal situation. It's unlikely because, as you know, so in order for genetic equilibrium to occur, right, that means that the allele frequencies stay exactly the same over time. But that's pretty much impossible because one of two things will happen. Either A, the environment changes, which creates new selection pressures, which favors certain traits, and those traits become more common, meaning the alleles that determine those traits become more frequent. So the allele frequencies will shift towards that. So that would destroy genetic equilibrium right there. Or two, there may not be a selection pressure, which is pretty rare. The environment usually changes and creates new selection pressures. But it could randomly change over time due to genetic drift as well. So it's very, very unlikely. In fact, it's pretty much impossible in real world. Mouse pillow. Could I give an example of convolution? Convolution is when you accidentally mix up the word evolution and coevolution and come up with convolution, and you get things convoluted. But I think you meant, I see, coevolution. Yeah. Can I give an example of coevolution? Yeah, I mean, the easiest example of coevolution is to talk about like a competitive situation, but you can talk about a cooperative one as well. So like Nate said, a bee and pollination of a flower is an example of a cooperative coevolution. But a competitive coevolution might be something like, let's say I have a rabbit and a fox, right? The fox wants to hunt the rabbit, right? That's the relationship. Fox wants to eat the rabbit. If the rabbit wants to avoid getting eaten by the fox, let's say this is like it becomes whiter to blend with snow. Okay, so the rabbit now evolves to be camouflaged. So the rabbit evolved in response to the fox trying to eat it. Right? Now the fox, in order to continue to be able to eat the rabbit, might evolve better vision. So now the fox can actually see the rabbit and eat it again. So the rabbit evolves in response to the fox, and now the fox evolves in response to the rabbit. They are evolving in response to each other. Another way of putting this is like they are selection pressures for each other. They act as selection pressures on each other. On each other. I'm squeezing it in. Amina, can I go over divergent and convergent evolution? Sometimes you mix them up. Do you just think about what the word diverge and converge mean? If something diverges, it means it goes in separate directions, right? So these are species that are evolving further away from each other. If convergent evolution is when two separate species evolve traits that are more similar to each other or have the same function as each other, right? So they're converging on a similar function. That's the gist there. What else? Thanks, Arya, for answering questions. Thanks for helping Amina out there. And thanks, Sanjay, for helping Mousepillow out. T-Dub, drag the bottom. Oh, just to expand the canvas on the paint thing, yeah. Nice answer, Arya. That's actually right on. You guys are having some good answers in the chat. Ashi, you asked at the beginning of is there going to be two? Yeah, it's going to be exactly like that. Yep. So for this quiz that we're taking tomorrow or Friday, depending on your period, on this quiz, you will basically get the score you get. You will not have an opportunity to retake the quiz because the retake will be the exam at the end of the unit. And if you do better on the exam, it will overwrite your score, your evolution quiz score. So it gives you like kind of a redemption chance, kind of like a holding place, so to speak. But the evolution exam at the end of the unit will have a short answer on it. So it'll be forcing you to write a response to using like the VIST framework to be able to write, coherently explain how a trait could have evolved. Amina, did we learn about both horizontal and vertical gene flow among bacteria? Well, vertical gene flow is just simply when, let me draw this. So horizontal gene transfer looks like this. You've got bacteria. Right, bacteria A, and then you've got bacteria B. And let's say there's a little ring of DNA here. All right, so what we would say is this is let's say this is just a gene. What happens is it can give a copy of it to B. Right? This is between two different bacteria, A and B. Vertical gene flow is basically just reproduction. Man, I really don't want to put an E at the end of gene. Vertical gene flow is when you have bacteria A, and you've got your gene in there that we care about. And it does mitosis. And it creates, right? Let's say A and A, right? Because mitosis creates two exact copies. And it's going to have those same genes. So for example, like we could say that horizontal gene transfer is usually bacteria only. As far as I'm aware, there might be other examples. All reproducing organisms do this. Right, so even humans, right, when we have children, when we reproduce, we do vertical gene flow. We pass our genes from one generation down to the offspring, to the next generation. Geez Louise, did you give me a water break? Sorry, I'm not looking at the requests today. Oh, Erebus. You gave me a request about 20 minutes ago, my guy. Sorry, I didn't see that. A little awkward when I'm doing when I'm dual streaming to YouTube and Twitch at the same time, because that gets me I don't see the requests as easily. But cheers to you, Jesus Louise, and to Erebus that I missed earlier. Ashi, is the quiz just 1 rows 1 and 2 of the kudos, or do you also want us to know a little bit microevolution? Yeah, it's just row 1 and 2. 1 and 2. Pranav, what's up? Do I have the key for the review material? Good question. Let me double check that. I may not. If I don't, then maybe you can ask a specific question. I don't think I do, Pranav. Is there something in particular on the reviews that you would like me to kind of help you out with? Anything specific? Because I can definitely take some time to do that. If we look at the review material, let's take a peek here. So just to kind of answer the questions that some of you were talking about as far as the, here is for the kudos guide, right? It's 1, right? Which is what we talked about with like this idea of VIST. So understanding the different parts of VIST, the evidence for evolution that we worked on with the worksheet, and then the general theory of evolution. We did the flightless bird case study, antibiotic resistance here. And then for 2, talking about like variation and selection strength can determine the rate of evolution, which, by the way, if you look back at the slides for week 2, all I did with these week 2 slides was I added that extra slide at the end, all the way at the bottom, that has the rate of evolution stuff when we were talking about that at the end of last class period. So I didn't upload a new week's worth of slides because really the only slide that was useful was this one slide that I used. So I just basically copied and pasted it onto the end of the PowerPoint from the previous week, so week 5. So this is related to, this slide is related to the 2B here. And then genetic drift and genetic diversity are things we talked about as well. Yeah, and then from 3 to 4, that's what we're going to cover after we come back from the break. Pranav, can I fill the table in the PopGen one? Sure. We're talking about this table here. Or this one. Which table? Question 4 or question 5? There's 2 tables. I'm assuming you mean the first one, but let me know. Pranav, you said yes. So did I ask a yes or no question? So it's 4. Your question number 4, right? Okay. So with this one, the description, I kind of did this. I don't know. Were you here when I described the difference between single and polygenic trait? I don't think I have that drawing anymore, no. So a single gene trait is essentially a trait that is determined by one gene. I mean, it's not that, I mean, the description is pretty straightforward. Right, and the example I gave is attached versus detached earlobe. Would you use a line or a bar graph? You would use a bar graph because the trait is either one thing or another when it's a single gene. There's no in between. So it's like either your earlobes are attached or detached. There's not really there's no like in-between attachment. So you'd use a bar graph. And you would describe this as frequency. How often the trait appears. And for this one, 2 or more genes are responsible for determining the trait. And we would say an example might be height that I used. You use a line graph because you can imagine you have height from like very, very short, like let's just say like from 4 feet tall all the way up to like 7 feet tall, right? And you could have a bunch of people at any point in between those two heights. It's not you're either 4 feet or you're 7 feet. It's anywhere in between. So you'd use a line graph to connect that. And this we would say average. because you would say it makes more sense to talk about what the average height of the population is, not the frequency of every single individual height, because everybody is slightly different heights. So there's too many different heights to use a bar graph and to describe it as a frequency. Whereas with a single gene trait, because there's only one gene, it creates very little possible differences, right? Very little variation for that trait. So you're going to have either attached or detached. So it makes sense to do a bar graph because there's nothing in between them, and you would describe it as how frequent is the attached versus the detached. That's how I would do that one. Can I do number 5? Sure. Wait, number 5 is very similar to what we did right at the beginning of the year, or the beginning of the unit, sorry, when we talked about the giraffe neck length. The only difference is this one is now asking you to add in some of the terms that we talked about, like alleles and frequencies, gene pool, population. T-Dub, how many students take bio each year on average? Let me think. There's usually like, I want to say 6 periods. So that would be 6 times 30, talking about like 90 students. I would say anywhere from like 90 to 100 students on average. Wait, no, I did not do my math right. I'm sorry. 6 times 30 is 90 because I'm smart. I literally added, all I did was add I added the 6 and the 3 and I got a 9 and then just threw the 0 on the end. That was what happened in my brain right there. Yeah, it's more like 180. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I don't meet the math prerequisite to take AP Bio based off that little episode I just had. Geez Louise, more neurons firing is always a good thing. What's up, Ahana? How are you doing? Thanks for stopping in. I made a new layout for our office hours. Try and keep it a little cleaner, make it a little more organized so you can see the chat and you can see what I'm talking about more clearly. I think I want to update this layout a little bit. Maybe put a border around the chat. And maybe make the chat background not dark black, but like a gray. It's a little harsh to be dark black. And then maybe do a border around the window for where the browser is. Would I be able to go over 1B on the antibiotic practice one? The answer is no, but I feel like my explanation is really bad. All right, let's look. 1B? Oh, okay, yeah. This is the one that I explained earlier. Did you hear me talk about this? I forget who asked. Somebody asked way back in sort of more in the beginning of the chat about something like this, but I can go over it again. Yeah, Sanjay, there's no, sorry. Yeah, I don't have answer keys, but I'll go over any one that you want. So, do antibiotics cause mutations? So I would say the answer is no for this. And the reason why it's no is The reason why it's no is essentially the fact that antibiotics are a chemical that is in the environment of a bacteria. That chemical is targeting a particular part of the bacteria, like the cell membrane maybe, or the cell wall, or some protein that's important for its survival. And what it does is it destroys that and damages that, so it kills the bacteria. Right? That's how an antibiotic usually works. It works in different ways, but some antibiotics work in that way. They're not causing mutations. So what happens is the antibiotics are just killing off the bacteria that have the unfavorable mutations. So the mutations arise naturally in a bacteria. So we could say something like mutations arise naturally during mitosis as bacteria divide. The mutations are not a result of the antibiotic. The antibiotic acts as a selection pressure and selects those bacteria with the beneficial mutations that give them a resistance to the antibiotic. That's the way I would sort of summarize it in my own words. If that makes sense. Is that clear? Does that make sense there? Mutations arise naturally during mitosis as bacteria divide. Yeah. Chaos Ninja. Oh my god, you're such a bad influence. Can't believe you. Yeah, so Ahana was asking about genetic drift. I talked a lot about genetic drift earlier. But yeah, I mean, essentially genetic drift is very similar to what Ashi and Nate were saying. Was that clear? And then what Arya is just saying right now is pretty good as well. If you want me to clarify it anymore, just ask, and I can do that. What did the gizmo say? What was confusing about the gizmo? they said this example. An example is if a tree falls on a population of red and green beetles and randomly happens to kill more green beetles than red ones. I don't understand how that related to genetic change and stuff. I think that was just showing you that it was just like a random event that occurred that happened to kill the green ones, which left more red available. So then over time, red beetles are now the more common trait, like that red trait. So, but it wasn't because like there was any sort of natural selection happening, right? Being green was not necessarily a disadvantage. It just happened that the green ones were killed. That's the idea. Yassine, I didn't mention that CO2 is a pollutant released from coal combustion. Is it okay? Yeah, so Yassine, it's kind of weird when we talk about carbon dioxide because carbon dioxide is not technically classified as an air pollutant, even though it has its issues with climate change and global warming and is a greenhouse gas. So it definitely has issues, but it's not technically a pollutant because carbon dioxide in and of itself is not toxic, right? So you can inhale carbon dioxide totally and be totally fine. It's not like carbon monoxide or particulate matter or ozone or these other pollutants that are a direct health issue. No problem, Mahana. No problem, Yassine. Ahana, what are some things that we could do to go over to review for the test? Well, so one thing I pointed out is just as far as the material is looking on the Kudos guide, right? Row 1 and row 2. Basically, the first page of the Kudos guide is going to give you some info that's going to be useful. But if you want to be a little more specific, you want to be able to you should be pretty confident in general about like what, like understanding like a good definition for the theory of evolution, and like what are some like things about the theory of evolution that would, like examples that would make it, you know, considered true. Some of the things related to like the evidence of evolution that we looked at. kind of maybe going back over some of the slides. So if you go to the class slides here, looking over the week 1 and the week 2 slides, where some of the things about the flightless birds towards the end of this, like looking at things like vestigial structures, repurposed traits. And then this has a lot of good info here, understanding genetic drift, all the different stuff about population genetics, the different selections. This slide is going to be good to review. How is the rate of evolution determined? And then antibiotic resistance is also going to be on the test, right? So you're going to want to know kind of the basics of antibiotic resistance. Maybe like why they evolve so quick. Why do bacteria tend to evolve so quickly? How might we slow down, antibiotic resistance? These kinds of things. Yassine, one more thing, actually. You said that vapor recovery nozzles, scrubbers, and baghouse filters are regulatory practices. Catalytic converters were alt fuels and electrolyzers are conservatory. Is that okay? Let me think real quick. So, no. So there's some things in there that I think aren't quite right. So the first part where you said vapor recovery nozzles, scrubbers, and baghouse filters are regulatory practices. Kind of, but not directly. So regulatory practices would be things like regulating the amount of emissions, right? So emission standards, right? Vehicle emission standards, pollution standards for things like coal power plants. Regulatory practice would be a way of regulating the emissions. So that would be fines or like repercussions for places that go over their limit. So you could talk about things like fines and punishments would be regulatory practices. The nozzles, scrubbers, baghouse filters, the electrostatic precipitators, catalytic converters, these are all technological things that decrease emissions or clean the exhaust before it's released, removing some of the pollutants, right? So they remove things like particulate matter, some of the nitrogen and sulfur gases, some of the like volatile organic compounds, these kinds of things. Alternative fuels would be things like hydrogen, or maybe even like natural gas. Methane would be an alternative fuel to like diesel or gasoline. And then conservatory practices are things that you would do to conserve. When you say conservatory, I'm assuming you mean like conserving the amount that you release. That would just mean, that would be something like reducing your output. So I mean, maybe like driving less or using less energy, especially if it's coming from a coal power plant, for example. These kinds of things. Does that make sense? Let me look. Were you looking at the are you looking at the Unit 7 study guide? Oh, I see this part right here. Um, I don't really like actually the way this is phrased at the end here. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and cut that right there. Black Magic Maestro. What is up, my guy? Thanks for the follow. I know you're not getting it. The alerts are not coming up on my stream right now because I'm doing a little office hours stream, so things are a little bit more running a little bit of a tighter ship. But thanks for the follow, and there's your hydration. Yassine, will those 3 aspects be tested? No. So what you're gonna get tested on as far as these things is understanding what these are used for and how they help with air quality, right? So knowing that what a vapor recovery nozzle is, what a catalytic converter is, what the scrubbers, the filters, and the precipitators are, these are the things that we use to basically reduce the amount of emissions by cleaning exhaust mostly. And so the source, you'd be like, okay, a vapor recovery nozzle is at a gas station, obviously. A catalytic converter is something that's put onto a car's exhaust system to decrease emissions from car exhaust. And then these last 3, Anonymous Gifter. T-Dub, you just got gifted a sub, my guy, from an anonymous gifter. Anonymous, I appreciate whoever you are, and I know that you do not attend Monte Vista because you're anonymous. I appreciate you. Kind stranger who definitely does not attend Monte Vista. T-Dub, enjoy your sub. Completely above board, legal, and for all intensive purposes, we'll never know. But it's all good. Yeah, so Yassine, I hope that answered your question. I missed a couple other ones, I think, while I was answering Yassine's question. So, Ahana, Ashi, I know you guys were having a conversation a little bit, but if you have any questions, go ahead and retype them because I wasn't following along with your convo. All right, Yassine, have a good night. Get some rest, my guy. I'll see you tomorrow. Does disruptive selection lead to two species? It can. So if we look back at the graph here, right? So when we talk about this disruptive selection, you gotta get this squishy bird not so squished. Dang, this bird is like really, need to really stretch him out. What do you think? Does that look about right? Does that look like the right ratio there? Oh, sorry. I have to. The squishy bird. He was all. This bird was like this. It was like all like squished low. So yeah. So when we have something like disruptive selection, as you can see here in this graph, it's totally possible, and this is the way that new species will form from this process of disruptive selection. But doesn't necessarily mean that a new species has to form. So for example, you could imagine that there's enough time would pass for these two populations to come back and remix their genetics, and they would not become species. So the disruptive selection has to last long enough, and there has to be some reproductive isolation between the two sides of the spectrum. So that's the idea. So it can lead to disruptive selection, but not necessarily always. All right, Nate. How many questions and parts on the quiz? There is 2 parts. First part is 6 questions. Second part is 8 questions for a total of 14 questions. Ahana, okay, and also on the gizmo, I don't know how to draw a graph for disruptive, stabilizing, and directional selection. All you have to do is draw them very much like this. These are the graphs. They should look like this. How long do you get? You get 7. Oh wait, hold on. 5 and 7 minutes. So a total of 12 minutes for 2 parts. Nathan, I don't think you don't think you wish you had 3 hours, actually. I mean, can you imagine having 3 hours for 14 questions? That's just a lot of times, or a lot of times, a lot of time. Look at that, no puppies. Blank, nothing. For evidence of evolution, would you be able to explain the other examples listed in the video that they didn't really go in depth about? TW, am I adopting a dog? Potentially. Yeah, I've been looking into it. I've been looking on the site. What is it? This site. So if we look at, like, they've got some that are coming soon, some pups, some cuties on here. This one's cute. Ashi, what that's a link to a pit? This is your link, Ashi? Wait, this is a pit? Oh, it's a pit mix. Very cute. Delilah. 35 pounds. Oh, 5 months. So it's, yeah. 35 pounds is a small pit. Very small. I am high energy pup who loves long walks, chewing and napping. I love to cuddle, sunbathe, and watch TV after long walks. How do I like to watch TV? Come on now. What did you implement for house training? Do you think it is working? We did lots of walks, big long walks. It's actually pretty, it's a cute pup. It's a nice size too. She's very, very petite. Oh wait, Ahana, I keep like you and Ashi. I just see the fact that you both have 2 A's at the beginning of your name, and I confuse you two in the chat because it's Ahana and Ashi, and I just see the first 2 A's. Thanks for the link. So Ashi, you were talking about the examples. So if we go back to here and we go to Unit 4 Evolution and we look at the homework, this one here. This is the one you're referring to. So which ones on here did you want a little help with? From the video? So like question number 1 or something? Well, I mean, we can watch the video again real quick.
Stated Clearly presents, what is the evidence for evolution? The theory of biological evolution makes 2 very bold claims about living creatures. First, all living things on Earth are related. They evolve.
Nate, real quick, or Nathan, do you think we have a potential date, or would that be decided like next Monday, start a break? You know, I was thinking about it. I'm thinking maybe instead of trying to do it all in one day, we just, as soon as things are ready to go, we start. So we can start with some of the things that are already like easy to do. So why don't we just establish that we'll start on Well, so it's not going to be Monday for sure, and it's not going to be Tuesday. It's probably going to be let's think about this. How about we do actually, how about we do Saturday? Saturday will be our like opening ceremony, so to speak, where we'll sort of like get things going and we'll do the first couple games. And then Wednesday, yeah, because Wednesday we can come back. Because I'm going to be gone on Sunday. I don't stream because that's the only day where my girlfriend has completely off of work. And so that day is I never stream on Sundays. And then Monday and Tuesday, I'm going to be gone because I'm actually going to go camping. And then I'll be back on Wednesday. So Saturday will be a check-in day and doing some of the like easy to set up events. And then hopefully on Wednesday, at least somebody has set up. Like I think Cytokine has the parkour course set up, so we could do parkour on Wednesday. I could probably have the scavenger hunt ready for Thursday. We could do the maze on Friday, and continue on from there. Yeah, let people know in the channel. So let them know that the opening, quote unquote, opening ceremonies are on Saturday. And I will start to stream on Saturday. I can't give you a perfect time, but I usually start streaming by about 5 o'clock on Saturdays. It just depends on how much work I have to get done in the morning and how long like my workout goes and how long my work takes. But if I can get on earlier, I will. We'll open it up. We'll do a little opening ceremonies action. And then we'll even do some like introductory games. I think probably the easiest ones to do we'll do on Saturday. And then hopefully people will start finishing stuff up by the end of the week so we can go from there. Arjun, will I be teaching apes next year? Yeah, as far as I'm aware, yes. Unless something dramatic happens, I will be donning my apes cap again for 2021 to 2022 school year. Okay, we have 8 people. 8 is perfect. 8 is like a perfect number. All right, Ashi. So the video didn't go more in depth about those things. It does show like a chart thingy, but only goes in depth for a few, but I understand those ones. Okay. So it's not the video that you're really worried about. It's more of this question that you're kind of concerned about. Is that right? Yeah, you came up with a list, but you don't understand what each one actually does. Are you talking about these 4? Well, let's watch the video again, and then we'll go from there. We'll put the video on. We'll play it back at 1.5 speed.
From a common ancestor. Second, the evolution of living things is powered by natural processes, things which can be studied and understood. But is there really any evidence that these two claims are true? Yes. There are so many observable facts from so many different fields of study that the only way we can even begin to talk about them is to group them into categories or lines of evidence. Right? So is this what you were talking about, Ashi? Where like, okay, so the first 4 are what we have listed here. And then the other examples are the ones that are listed below that, like species distribution, evolution observed, predictive power, nested hierarchies of traits. Those ones, is that what you were like confused about? keep things simple, here we'll focus on evolution's first claim that all living things on Earth are related. We cannot tackle the entire tree of life at once. After all, there's an estimated 8.7 million species alive today. So instead, we'll focus most of our attention on one fairly small but fascinating branch of the evolutionary tree, cetaceans. This branch includes whales, dolphins, and porpoises. Biologists tell us that all these creatures are closely related, and that the entire group evolved from an ancient four-legged land mammal. Instead of taking their word for it, let's look at the facts. We'll start by looking at a few from the field of comparative anatomy, the study of differences and similarities between living things. Whales live in water, and from a distance, they sort of look like giant fish. A close inspection of their anatomy, however, tells us a very different story. Whales, just like land mammals but unlike fish, have placentas and give live birth. They feed milk to their young. They are warm-blooded, which is extremely rare for a fish. And whales do not have gills. Instead, just like us, they breathe air with two fully developed lungs. Whales don't seem to have noses like mammals do. Instead, they breathe through blowholes coming out the tops of their heads. Some whales have two blowholes which almost look like nostrils. But dolphins and porpoises only have one. Surprisingly, if you look at their skulls, you find that the blowhole splits into two nasal passages inside the head.
These are interesting, yeah. These are interesting evidences. Let's see. Nathan, I think I'm going to ping the people who are participating. That way they know and I don't have to ping everyone. Yeah, that's fine. That's good.
Could it be that the blowhole is actually a highly modified mammal nose? It looks that way, but we'll need more evidence to be sure. Many whales have hair, just like land mammals. In this photograph, you can actually see the whiskers of this baby gray whale.
Yeah, sorry, T-Dub. I watch videos on fat. Maybe it's not the best. I'm kind of an impatient person, so when I watch YouTube videos, unless it's something that I'm like really trying to understand and I have to, or it's like really complicated, and I have to have it go slow. Most of the time I speed it up just to save myself time. Like I listen to podcasts on like 1.5 speed and things like that. If you get to 2 times speed, it starts to be too quick. Like 1.5 is usually pretty good. Also, I love the feature on podcast apps that allows you to cut out the silence in between, so that like all the words are just like right out. So you can cut out like 20% of an episode just by doing that.
Whale as he rests his chin on mama's back. Strangely, whales have arm, wrist, hand, and finger bones.
There's the
inside their front
homologous
flippers.
structure.
Here's a photo of these bones, the same bones that bats, hippos, and people have in their front appendages. 1 bone, 2 bones, wrist, hand, and finger bones.
Yep.
Modern whales do not have back legs, but they do have a strange pair of bones where the hind legs should be. Here's a picture of these bones from a bowhead whale. They almost look like shriveled hip, thigh, and shin bones. This one even has a ball and socket joint between the hip and thigh bone, just like the ball and socket joint in your own hip. Is this resemblance a mere coincidence, or are these real leg bones? Perhaps leftovers from the whale's evolutionary history? Before we draw any bold
Vestigial
conclusions,
structures.
let's see if a completely separate line of evidence will confirm our suspicions. Embryology is the study of how creatures develop before being born or hatching from an egg. Here we see a dolphin and a human embryo side by side at similar stages of development. Notice that they both have what look like arm buds and leg buds. In humans, the leg buds grow to become legs. In whales, they grow for a while but then stop, effectively fading away as the rest of the whale continues to grow. These are all photographs of a common dolphin at different stages of growth. Notice that early on, we see 2 nostril grooves on the front of the face, just like you'd expect in a puppy or a human. As the dolphin continues to grow, the nostrils migrate to the top of the head and fuse together, becoming the dolphin's blowhole. So far, we have multiple facts from 2 independent lines of study, comparative anatomy and embryology, that are both telling us the same story. The ancestors of whales were once 4-legged land creatures. Will the fossil record act as a third witness, confirming this idea? These are 2 species of extinct basilosaurid whales. These animals are known for multiple well-preserved skeletons, and they appear to have lived side by side, roughly 34 to 40 million years ago. In this photograph, we're looking down at the top of a basilosaurid skull. This is not a model or a cast, these are the actual bones which were pulled from the ground. Notice that the nasal opening is not on the top of the head like those of modern whales, and not at the end of the snout like those of land mammals. Instead, it's right in the middle. This is an intermediate species, exactly what evolution tells us we should find. At the back end of a basilosaurid's body, there are small, yet fully developed hips, legs, ankle, feet, and toe bones. These legs are far too small for walking on land, but they may have been useful while mating, or for scratching away parasites and itchy skin. Evolutionary theory tells us that the further we go back in time, the harder it should be to distinguish whales from normal land mammals. Meet Myocetus. The hip bones of Myocetus seem sturdy enough to walk on land, but this animal is considered to be a whale for many reasons. Their skeletons have all been found among fossils of sea creatures, which tells us they lived in the ocean. Their short legs, combined with long, flat fingers and toes, suggest they were strong swimmers with webbed hands and feet. Here we see the bottom side of a Mycetes jaw and skull. Her teeth match those of the basilosaurid whales we saw earlier, and the unique structures of her middle ear bones match those of basilosaurid whales and modern whales. Mycetes appears to be a walking whale. Scientists have found the fossils of many ancient whale-like mammals and continue to find more. Together, these fossils blur the line between four-legged land mammals and fully aquatic modern whales, solidifying the idea that whales indeed evolved from land creatures. Now let's look at a fourth line of evidence, DNA. DNA molecules contain chemical codes which act like recipes for living things. Without ever looking at bones, embryos, or...
So DNA has become probably the most important evidence for evolution. It's the most probably convincing because DNA is the code for all of life, right? It's the instructions for determining the characteristics and traits of an organism. And so when you compare the genetic code of all these organisms, you can see just how related they are by the amount of mutations that have occurred and the different genes that are there and the sequence of bases. It's become probably the best and most useful information. And keep in mind, DNA evidence didn't exist until the technology to sequence DNA came about, which was much, much later than the theory of evolution was invented. Or was sort of proposed. So that all of the evidence of fossils and embryological evidence and these kinds of things came first to support evolution. And then when DNA was discovered and our ability to sort of sequence it and read DNA got better and better, the evidence the evidence after the fact just was right and backed up the theory of evolution even stronger and even harder. So it's pretty useful.
Researchers can compare the DNA code of different living creatures to find out who is most closely related to who. Whale DNA has been compared to all kinds of other animals, fish, sea lions, you name it. And so far, the closest genetic match is to the pudgy, water-loving hippopotamus. This does not mean that whales evolved from hippos, but if this genetic finding is correct, whales and hippos both evolved from a common ancestor that lived roughly 54 million years ago. At first, the link between whales and hippos surprised researchers because whales are mainly carnivores. They eat things like fish and small crustaceans. Hippos, on the other hand, are mostly vegetarian. A closer look, however, reveals that hippos and whales actually share many strange features, some of which may have come from their common ancestor. Ancient walking whales have specially shaped ankle bones, found only in hippos and the close relatives of hippos. Just like whales, hippos are known to give birth and even nurse their young underwater. They both have multi-chambered stomachs, which is common for herbivores, but is almost unheard of for meat-eating mammals. They are both missing a coat of fur, and here's a fun fact. Whales and hippos are among the only mammals on Earth that have internal testicles. So there you have it.
Streamlined.
4 independent lines of evidence all tell us the exact same story. Whales evolved from 4-legged land mammals. But the history of whales is not the only evolutionary history that we've been able to work out. We know from fossils, DNA, embryology, and many other lines of evidence that bird wings are actually modified arms and claws. Birds evolved from dinosaur-like ancestors. We can also clearly see that bat wings evolved from 5-fingered hands, very similar to those of monkeys and shrews. We've found that humans share a fairly recent common ancestor with chimpanzees, that mammals evolved from reptile-like creatures, those reptile-like creatures evolved from amphibian-like creatures, those amphibian-like creatures evolved from fish-like creatures,
Now singular
and
daily
fish,
bit.
if you go back far enough, share a common ancestor with segmented
What up,
worms.
Marcus?
So to sum things up, thousands of observable facts from completely independent fields of study have come together to tell us the exact same story. All living things on Earth are
Yeah, Ahana, when will we know the results? I'm gonna be grading the M&M labs over the break. So I'm just gonna pick one day over the break to read them and give you a grade. But I probably won't publish the grades till towards the end of the break. Okay, so getting back to your original point, Ashi was here. Or no, here? Here. Wait, what? Okay, so I can briefly give you some information. So species distribution. This just refers to where the species are in the world, right? So the idea is that species are distributed in such a way where species exist geographically, relatively close to other species that are similar to them in terms of evolutionary history. So for example, the flightless cormorants evolved from the mainland cormorants, and so they're distributed close to each other, right? You can see how one could have gotten from one place to the other. That's what we mean by species distribution. Evolution observed. This is actually just witnessing evolution in progress. So, for example, like antibiotic resistance is a good piece of evidence for evolution, because we've literally seen antibiotic bacteria become more and more resistant over time. We've seen that in our lifetime. Another example of evolution observed is our ability to like do artificial selection with things like crops and dogs and cats and other domesticated animals. So since humans have domesticated both plants and animals over time, we've bred together those with the most desirable traits, and we've seen how they've changed over time simply through artificial selection. So that's an example of evolution observed. Predictive power of evolution. This is the idea that if we can make a prediction into the future, so if we know the selection pressures in an environment, we can predict potentially what kind of evolution might occur and what kinds of traits we might see develop or change over time, right? So the idea is that the theory of evolution is strong, and it's supported by evidence, because some of the evidence is literally we can use it to predict future events. So one of the most powerful pieces of evidence for any theory or any model is how good is it at predicting the future, right? Like how good is it? So for example, we talk about something like the theory of gravity is very good at predicting, because I can say, if I were to drop something, it is going to fall to the ground, and it's like every time I do it, my future prediction is correct. So with evolution, we can use that same idea. And then this last one, nested hierarchies of traits. I'm actually not 100% sure what that one is. Nested hierarchies of traits. Nested hierarchies of traits. We may have to look into that one in a little more detail, because that one's a little confusing to me. I mean, I can try and break it down. So this would be like that you have like traits within traits or something like that, probably, but we'd have to look that up more detailed. Do you want to look into that at all, Ashi? Do you care enough to look into that, or did what I just say satisfy your curiosity on that front? What's up, NJ? Long time no see. Thanks, Ahana. Have a good night. I will see you on Friday. How would traits be into traits? I don't know. I mean, we can Google that. See what comes up. Berkeley site. Let's see. Evolution. Oh, this is. Evolution predicts that living things will be related to one another in what scientists refer to as nested hierarchies, rather like nested boxes. Groups of related organisms share suites of similar characteristics, and the number of shared traits increases with relatedness. This is indeed what we observe in the living world and in the fossil record, and these relationships can be illustrated as shown below. Huh? I'm clicking. I don't see any. That doesn't show. Doesn't work. Oh, it's an animation. In this phylogeny, phylogeny is just like an ordering or a grouping. Snakes and lizards share a large number of traits, as they are more closely related to one another than the other animals represented. The same can be said of crocodiles and birds, whales and camels, humans and chimpanzees. However, at a more inclusive level, Snakes, lizards, birds, crocodiles, whales, camels, chimps, and humans all share common traits. Humans and chimps are united by many shared inherited traits, such as 98% of their DNA. But at a more inclusive level of life's hierarchy, we share a smaller set of inherited traits in common with all primates. More inclusive still, we share traits in common with other mammals and other vertebrates and other animals. At the most inclusive level, we sit alongside sponges, petunias, diatoms, and bacteria in a very large box entitled living organisms. Okay, so essentially what you have is like this idea of a nested hierarchy is that you have, like, imagine the entire tree of life, right? The entire tree of life, everything in that tree of life, all living organisms share some common features, right? Right? Those would be like characteristics of living things that we talked about way back in the beginning of the year. We talked about things like based on a genetic code, right? So all living things are based off of a genetic code like DNA or RNA. All living things reproduce, right? They propagate themselves into the future. All living things require energy, right, to maintain themselves, right? They have a metabolism. So the idea is that you can group everything in one big clump of living organisms that all have similar traits, and then you can like narrow your field of view on more and more specific organisms. And as you narrow your field of view, those organisms that you're zooming in on will share more and more common things, right? So like humans and chimps are like very closely related, so we share a lot of traits, right? And then if you zoom out to whales, camels, humans, and chimps, these four share certain traits. Does that make sense? I guess that's what we mean by nested hierarchies of traits on this video. Yeah, kinda, thanks. Nah, I'm not convinced. Gave me a kinda. Alrighty. It is 9 o'clock. It looks like things are kind of slowing down in the chat. So, and it's been 2 hours, so it seems could be a place to sort of call it. Want to play some? We can try it. What do you guys think? I could jump on Minecraft, or I don't know. Is there enough people interested in doing something else? We could try something different. Let's see. Let's see. We can give Among Us a try. We can see. We can see if people are down. Aria, see you later. I will see you later. Thanks for stopping in. Always nice to see you. NJ, you're bordering on the creep zone, my guy. Actually, you're not bordering on it. You're fully 2 feet planted in the creep zone, my guy. All right, let's go ahead and switch this up. Oh. Okay. Alrighty. Let's see how many people are on right now willing to play a little Among Us. Play a couple rounds before we call it, right? Play a couple rounds. People are finishing up homework. I hear ya. I hear that. Way to be responsible and know when to stick to other important obligations. Oh, you are not responsible? Well, I mean, at least you're doing it before it's late. See, this is why whenever we play, whenever I go to do this is one of the reasons why I don't particularly like Among Us as much anymore. It's just not as many people I think are interested. And it's also a game that I've slowly but surely lost interest in over time. I wonder what the users on Among Us. What is? I wonder if there's like. I'd love to see if there's a graph of Among Us over time. All right, here's the data on Among Us users. Here's the Steam data. So Steam charts. If we go to all time, look at this. Peaked August 31st, 2020. And then it's just been declining ever since. We're down to 44%. This looks like GameStop stock. This kind of stuff. It was up 788%. Wow, it was actually not doing good at all. Look at this. Looking for the entirety of like its first 6 months of release. It didn't have any more than like 37 players at peak at one time. And then something happened in June. Got 209, and then it went up, and then it kind of leveled for a little bit. For the next like almost year. And then in, I would say starting in somewhere around May 2020, things exploded for the next 6 months. And then it crashed. But it's still way higher than it was originally, so. Yeah, see, we only have 4 people. We can't do this. I'll turn it on public. Yeah, it got repetitive. I mean, the game is not the most because like it feels like at a certain point when you play Among Us enough, it becomes, yeah, I don't know how to explain it. It just becomes a little bit like, I don't know what I'm trying to think of like the way to explain it. It just feels like a little bit like stale after a while. Yeah. No, I mean, Among Us is not a game for somebody who's trying to grind, right? Among Us is a game that is mostly designed for people to have a social kind of component to it. All right, here we go. We got 9 players. Let's just do it. Let's do it. Oh, we're gonna go. We're going. Yeah, playing with friends. All right, let's do this. It's definitely been a minute since I played this game, that's for sure. Fix the lights. Okay, Emma being sus down there. Oh, everyone's here. Oh, yeah, first try. It's good to be back. Oh, I missed it. Overshot my target. What is happening right now? No one's finding dead bodies? Meanwhile, we're just absolutely destroying our tasks. Wait, what? What is that? Oh. That's weird how it's showing me an arrow right there. Icy. Nate. Oh. Dude. I wonder what they're gonna say. I mean, that was a terrible kill. I got owned. But hey, at least I like accomplished pretty much all of my tasks. But yeah, I'll kick somebody. Poor Nate. Just wrong time, wrong place, my guy. Question is, who is the other? Uh-oh, someone's calling an emergency meeting. Can we change some settings? I guess. Yeah, what's the ideal settings? I'm not 100% sure. Put this in a better spot. Make it a little easier. More tasks. Okay. Voltlock. What up, man? It's been a while. I feel like you pop on and then you disappear. You vanish for a couple weeks. You spent 4 hours learning Latin today and 0 hours doing homework. Question. Why? 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 College apps had me dead. Where are you at with your college apps? Like, okay, I can call you that. Appa, you are. I could make this private. Wait, I gotta kick some people, or just one person, right? How do I kick? How do I kick? How do I kick? How do you kick? Oh, here we go. Who's who? T-Dubs, TPK, TPWK, I know that. Nate, I know. Diaz, I know. I don't know Player. I don't know Icy. I don't know Emma. I don't know Bleh. I'm kicking Icy. Because they said, can we start? That means they're not watching stream, which means they're not. Get in here. Appa, you get in here. There we go. Here we go. Wait, what settings? This is the settings right now. The settings aren't too bad, I don't think. All right, we're going to play with these settings, and if you don't like them, too late. You are too late. We'll do it next time. You're too late. Taskbar, please. Okay, whatever that is, I'll look at it. You're done with all your essays, but I have to manage financial stuff, financial aid stuff. Oh yeah, scholarships aren't done yet, and I got into UT Austin. Nice, congrats on UT Austin. Oof, rip to T-dubs. What I call a connection bust. Disconnection. Yeah, UT Austin, man, that's awesome. Where is that on your ladder of choices, on your hierarchy of choices? Dead body reported. Wait, who spotted it? Bleh? What did he say? Why did he not mention anything? You only heard back from 2 of the 20 colleges. I'm waiting to hear from the rest. It's a good college, but I also applied to a ton of top colleges. So we'll see. Okay. Already rejected. Hey, I felt the same. I got rejected. I remember feeling pretty disappointed getting rejected from UC San Diego. I remember that was like my school I really wanted to attend was UCSD. That was considered a top college for me. And I know that you probably my pool was probably a little narrower than yours. I didn't have the best of high school resumes. Yeah, everything was confused. I'm out. I'm skipping. Could be like, where's the sus at this point? Oh, am I dead? Is someone gonna kill me? Is Diaz gonna kill me? Wow. Wait, he did it right in front. Oh, it's a self-report. Right in front of Appa. Diaz. Diaz with the setup. Big setup. It's cringe. Oh man. That was like a big bet on the setup there from Diaz. I don't think it's going to pay off, though. Because App was pushing hard back against Diaz's setup, big time. And Emma is calling out Diaz, saying, no orange, then no orange, then orange. It's literally them. I'll take it. Wait, Adarsh, can you can submit an application to a school without an SAT score and then submit it later, and that's totally fine? I didn't know that. I thought you had to have your entire like application ready to go, including SATs. Wow, no one. It was a wow. Oh, only this year. Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. Most colleges are SAT optional. Interesting. Is that a good? Do you feel? Question. Do you feel like the COVID year is making it easier or harder for the whole college application and college admittance thing? $100% harder? Okay. And that's just because why? You don't have all the documentation you would normally want? Let's watch what's going on here. Wow, Emma just bounced. Oh, due to error. You know what's annoying? I can't scroll up to the chat. They don't let you see the entirety of the chat. That's annoying. More applicants, but a case could be made that since it's COVID and SAT optional, less impressive kids are also applying. Okay. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I'd have to see the. I'm not 100% sure. Why do you feel bad for me? Oh, wow, man. How is Diaz convincing everybody? This has been rough. Diaz just straight up has framed the entirety of this freaking game. Oh, look at the body. Look at the body. Look at the body. Whoa, yellow. Yeah, it's Diaz. Apple, you're so mad. You're big mad at Diaz. He's outplayed you. He outplayed you, bro. You got outplayed. Even though he's going to lose, but you got outplayed originally. Oh, because of what played in the game? Yeah. We won, but it was narrow. You think College Board is a bad company, but we need a standardized test, at least nationally or at the college level. I will say College Board, from an experience just as like an AP teacher in regards to it, not a big fan. Like for the amount of money they make, their infrastructure is pretty poor. Their website is garbage. Like their website is so unintuitive, takes forever to load, lacks sort of like usability. It's definitely better than it was, but it's still like it's for a company of that size and of that stature, and for a company who basically has a monopoly over every single standardized test, you would think that that money would go further. Let me see. What do we want to change here, Appa? You said you want anonymous votes. Wait, what did you want? Taskbar updates. When? To meetings only? Make taskbar updates to meetings. Okay. Anything else? And make taskbar updates. What else? Is it? Make tasks 214. Really? That makes it harder for the survivors. Okay. Wait, should we open it up to get two randos in here? Voltlock, an SAT is not random like people say. No, do people say SAT is random? I do know that the biggest, I would say the biggest criticism of the SAT, but this is just a criticism. It's not necessarily the SAT's fault, like this style of test's fault, but like it doesn't really measure. And I don't know if there really is anything that's, oh man, if there's anything easy to measure this, but like it doesn't measure certain kinds of skills that you would like to have, right? Like it doesn't measure, your social IQ, like your ability to interact with others. So that's kind of like, I guess, what a letter of rec would hopefully get across. It's blah. He messed with the lights. What up, Joe? I think most people here are now from Twitch and not really from YouTube anymore. This is what they need. This needs to be on the SAT test right here. Card slide. Attempt. My SAT score. Okay, all right. Am I going too fast? Oh, I wasn't going far enough. What was that? Wait. It's the oxygen one? So blue, yellow, and white I can account for here. Blue, yellow, white, blue, yellow, white. Blue, yellow, white. People say the SAT doesn't measure anything useful. Yeah, I think the SAT is definitely measuring something in regards to like your ability to like process information, a little bit of memory, a little bit of like analytical thinking on certain things. I don't know. It's been a long time since I took the SAT. Confirm blue and green. Different map? Sure. Yeah, so Darsh, I think the SAT it definitely measures something that's probably can be useful for a lot of things. Yeah. I think the one of the concerns is potentially like accessibility. I'll skip this. No, we're going white. Shoot. Let's see. Accessibility potentially. I feel like, and this is just a general problem with any test is, and I just know this from giving tests for a long time. Wow. APA was super. APA and T-dubs had absolutely no sus on them the entire game. That was pretty good. How do we change map? We're going to go map change. Yeah, so like I know from giving tests that one of the biggest issues with like one of the big things that differentiates people's success on tests, like multiple choice style tests, is reading comprehension or reading speed. Like the ability to like read a question, like parse its meaning, understand what it's asking, and then read the options and understand those. Like that is there's a lot of processing going on there. That is if you're maybe like not like a native English speaker, potentially could be an issue, or if you have a slower reading speed. So there's some issues with exactly how it's testing certain things, but yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to it. Create game. I have never done Polis, I don't think, so we can try it though. Let's try it. Do we like the same settings in Polis as everywhere else, having these settings? Vision lower for who? Crewmate? Like half? All right, Ashi, have a good night. Always appreciate you. Good questions tonight. Ashi, I feel like the questions you ask always make me have to like double think about stuff. I'm always like reviewing all the stuff that you ask. Appa, you're so mad. You get so mad. It's so... All right, we got 8 people. I think that's enough. All right. All right. pull off of the stream if you're on. No cheating. Oh, I pressed the wrong button. Oh, Matt, you got in? Wait, was that you? Wait, Matt, who were you? You were Turtle? I think being good at English should be scored, and not being as good as a native speaker, well, unfortunate, does make you, as say, an employee less valuable than an equally credentialed native speaker. Communication important in a job and all that. Well, yeah, I mean, like to an extent, but is the point of the SAT to establish your English speaking abilities, or is the point of an SAT to establish other kinds of skills, right? I guess it comes down to like, what's the point of the SAT? Is it filtering out like how well you can like read and understand a question? Is that part of it? I guess it would have to get into the whole philosophy of like what the SAT is trying to do. But you get into a lot of weird territory there, because I don't think anyone wants to officially, because once you start like saying what it's trying to test for, then you start establishing a list of like what you think is important to test for, and then people get a little worried about that. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much impossible to get like any kind of fairness in any sort of arena, because there's just variation among people. People have different skill sets. Oh wait, okay. I have not played this map, so I'm gonna be a little bad at it. And I don't know where anything is. I don't know where airship is. Let me pull up a map over here. Let me pull up a map, a Polis map on my other side. Wait, airship? Oh, dropship? Okay. That was really quick. Gotta change my Twitch info. I've been on just chatting. It should be Among Us, actually. Sorry. I'm skipping because I wasn't paying attention. My B. I've been too worried about other stuff. So you're saying that the SAT is trying to do a lot of things, essentially, in one test. Man, the vision is just awful. Wait, where are the lights? Gotta go. There we go. Oh, I was just trying to figure out. I could not figure out for the life of me how this task works. What do? You press this. Oh, you scan it. I feel like I'm gonna have to practice a lot of these, because Appa bounced. All right, Appa, have a good one. Yeah, I think when you're looking at like SAT scores and trying to figure out about like, well, what are they testing? Like, why are some people more successful than others? I think if you really sort of start to dig down into it, you have to start thinking about questions like nature versus nurture stuff, right? Like how much of someone's ability to do a certain task is learned versus learned versus actually just I just have a gift. Wait, what does this even work? How does this work? Status bad? Man, I don't even know how to do these tasks. Why do these things look like breasts on the side here? Do they not? So yeah, so I mean, ultimately, you start getting into like some of the some questions that are pretty hard to answer, like how much of intelligence is nature versus nurture, how much of like how much can you like put in, how much does hard work really contribute to your success compared to just sort of your natural your natural like temperament in regards to like information processing. Voltlock, I feel like you and I would be much better suited to have our conversations in like a Discord voice channel or something, because it feels hard to have a conversation with you that flows just due to the stop and start nature of it. So if you're ever interested and you want to chat, feel free to let me know. I can drag you into a Discord channel and we can have a little combo. Sure, I'd love to hear your opinion on it. Where are you? Are you in the? It can't be a very long combo because it's already 9. What is it? 9:45. But we can do a few minutes. There you are. You're in the general. I see.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to mute the stream.
Yeah, I got that muted.
So wait, I didn't quite understand what you meant when you said that we stratify our analysis automatically into nature groups. What do you mean by that?
So, in the question of nature versus nurtured, right?
Right.
I was talking about the SAT, which is a little different than intelligence. Because the SAT, there is like a nature and nurture like components, right? They're both of those components.
Mm-hmm.
So all I was saying is that the importance of nature in terms of like, let's say the variance of scores is so much more dominant than the importance of nurture that when we do our analysis, we're sort of like all the nature just sort of fades into the background and we're just looking at the micro variations of nurture. It's not like a sort of equal variance in which we're seeing both nature and nurture. It's like you have to account for all the nature, like, and that's like 95% of the, well, 95% is probably a little high, but that's most of it. So then when you look at nurture, you kind of have to control for nature in a way so that it just seems like nature's not having an effect, but it's actually everything in that sort of area is constant, if that makes sense.
Kind of. I think I lost you a little bit when in the beginning, which made it hard for me to follow the rest of it. So when you say the idea of like it's the test itself is already establishing that like nature is like corresponding to like vast majority of your success on it just by the way the test is written.
Yes. Just the nature of that's a pun kind of, but the way the SAT works is that enough of it is nature determined and enough of it is not nurture determined, that when you look at things like economic impact, which is non-negligible. As I'm sort of let's not talk about the SAT. Let's just take an example. Let's say your ability to score on test A is really basically an IQ test, but like it has a few like general knowledge questions, right? So that would be a consequence of 95% nature, right? Because it's an IQ test, and then the 5% nurture would be your ability to know common knowledge and English language and stuff like that.
Okay, so hold on, let me stop you there for a second. So what you're differentiating. So when you say nature versus nurture, like it seems like implied in that when you're talking about like a test, for example, you're saying that there are some kinds of questions that are going to particularly be targeting nature, and some kinds of questions that would target nurture.
Yes, for example, like a grammatical English question would be a good mix, because a grammatical question would be like it's in part about logical systems, being able to identify the logical rules of grammar. It's also part knowing those rules because they're not intuitive necessarily, right? So you have to be taught them, and they also have to be good at following and understanding the rules.
So you
Math
feel
is
like hold on, I just want to like make sure I'm clear on that. So you say like following rules is a nature kind of thing,
Yeah,
like
it's logical following, like.
So it's not something that can be learned.
It's something. Here. Let me say what I'm saying a little more clearly. Mathematical ability is very much something that is a matter of giftedness more so than development. Now you can stifle that development, right? Like very easily. You can like deprive them of nutrients and nutrition. You cannot nurture, like to use the word, you cannot raise them well, deprive them of education and development as children, especially as a small child, right? So people who are gifted can be can turn out to not have those abilities because of their past. But giving those sort of highly abstractive, highly computational abilities to people is not something. It's like if you did that, to put it in Jordan Peterson's quotes, you'd win a Nobel Peace Prize, because it's not been shown to be even possible. And it's like the question, because it's a problem for some people who can't get a job in a highly complex society like ours. It's not like they're less valuable as people, but in terms of as a job, they can struggle finding a job in which they're competent enough at. So it's an important question that we've not been able to answer. The ability for things that are more nature focused, like general abstractive abilities and computational abilities.
So I guess the question would be, when you say, so I think I might need like a more concrete example to help me with this. So you're saying that when you have like a question that is, so you have like, you're saying math, right? Math is one of those like very nature-y based problem, like skill sets, so to speak.
Yeah. Yes, it's exactly. Mathematicians and physicists have the highest IQs because they're. Oh, sorry, 1 second.
Oh, sorry, Nathan. I didn't see. I didn't get a chance to turn on anonymous voting. I'm a little distracted, obviously, right now. I'm having a conversation.
Sorry. So mathematicians and physicists have the highest IQs because essentially what physics and math is a matter of doing like large scale and quick abstractions of concepts, right? And that's what intelligence is. Like I'm using the psychological definition of intelligence.
Right. You're being very technical with the way you're using the word intelligence, right? You're not using it as just a general caveat for just like, because a lot of times people use the word intelligent.
Someone who's less intelligent is less worth or less valuable as a person, right? Like,
the problem, I think, is that word is so connected to emotion and so connected to people feeling like intelligence is such like is something that's so valued, I think, in a lot of ways, that people feel like if we can measure something that's so valuable, and then if we're measuring it and it's coming out in like, different outcomes for different people, it feels bad, right? To like feel
it does feel bad, yes.
So, but when you're using the word intelligence, you're saying that by your definition that someone that's intelligent is able to do a certain kind of like processing.
It's large scale general abstractions and computations, both large scale and quickly. Your ability to do that's intelligence. And that's been like statistically created by psychometricians. Like that was the only thing. We essentially we started out with the multiple intelligence theory, and the only thing that had any correlation or accounted for any variance was that the ability to do general abstractions and quick calculations.
What do you mean by multiple intelligence theory?
So sort of some theories about like emotional intelligence, social intelligence.
Oh,
like, yeah. All those there's like no studies really like supporting those theories.
When you so you're saying you take the word intelligence and you're tacking on something at the beginning to sort of say like there's different kinds of intelligence.
That existed. Yeah, some people thought like some things are, for example, some people are more socially intelligent or emotionally intelligent.
So but do you don't disagree with the fact that some people have better social skills?
Yes, skills. Yes, this is the point. We would classify those as skills, but we wouldn't say there's intelligence, because the reason we would call all of them intelligence is because they're in a group that correlates with each other, but they don't correlate with each other, and they don't correlate as far as we can tell with anything as like a useful concept. That's it's like particularly useful. Like IQ is a very useful concept in terms of predicting economic success. It's by far the best predictor we have of economic success. So it's particularly useful.
So so
best means at top of the list. It still only accounts for 30% of the variance in total with everything else. So I'm not saying like IQ is the only thing. I want to make sure every time I have these debates, some people think I mean that. I'm just saying IQ is the best predictor we have, and all the predictors combined account for 30% of the variance, which leaves 70% of the variance to other factors. Let me put that out there. Yeah, so continue, Mr. Jones.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think because a lot of times people have like initial strong reactions to statements like so when you say something like intelligence is the strongest predictor for financial success, or is that what you said?
Success. Long-term economic success. That's what it officially is. Long-term economic success.
Okay. Right. So that's just something that when you say that, people oftentimes will push back against that for a variety of reasons, right? Like one might be, how do you define intelligence, right? But you're defining it in a very technical sense.
Yeah, a very technical sense.
Right.
Everything I'm saying is just the science right now. I've like my opinion about the thing we were talking about, the SAT. That's where the opinion comes in. Right now, I'm just saying that intelligence correlates. The best thing we have that correlates with long-term economic success is IQ. The next best thing, the correlation is like 0.6, which is like the.
So hold on. Another thing is when you use the word success, it's a very broad term,
this
right?
Metric is very subjective. Like economic success, like there's definitely a subjectivity to it, but like it's not completely arbitrary. So I think it was calculated using income level.
Right, so it's financial success.
Financial success, exactly.
I wonder, are there any studies in relationship to the intelligence versus like happiness, like a maybe it's perceived happiness, right, or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read any studies, but I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about them, and he said that essentially.
Do you get any of your information from anywhere aside from Jordan Peterson?
There's this one channel. I forgot what it's called. I haven't been watching anything really recently, but I forgot this one. He's a psychiatrist, psychologist, but he more talks about like drug stuff and also general like counseling stuff. But yeah, I do, but very much. I'm not gonna pretend like I don't get most of my information. But to answer your question, so what the science essentially says is that economic or let's say income, right, or wealth, beyond a certain point, wealth does not correlate with happiness. So as long as, how he puts it is, as long as you can keep the rent collectors and the bills at bay, right, anything past that does not really add much to success, to happiness.
Yes, I have heard like the idea that what is it, like 50,000 a year in the U.S., like something where it's like your bare minimum, like you have a place to live, you don't have to worry about bills, all that stuff. Yeah,
eat, right, you're not worried about food on the table, you're supporting your family, right, as long as you don't have an economic financial problems. That's the good way of putting it. As long as you really don't have any important financial problems, wealth doesn't necessarily correlate with happiness.
That makes sense. And I've heard that. Also, it would be interesting to see. I would imagine that there's a lot more of your happiness is in my. I think I remember reading something like your happiness is also highly correlated to your perceived status within your social group. So like you could be making
that's true.
like $1 billion, but if your best friend is like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, you're gonna kind of feel bad, you know?
Yeah.
If
It's
you
called a
value
Gini
financial success, obviously.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a It's called a Gini coefficient, and basically, Gini coefficients are a way of measuring happiness. And what they found is that Gini coefficients are very high where the wealth distribution is relatively flat. So if you're in a very rich area and everyone is generally very rich, your Gini coefficient for that community is high. If you're in a very poor area, even in absolute poverty, not like it sort of tails off there, but even in like really horrible conditions that today, here in the United States we'd consider like to be like, dreadful conditions. Even there, the Gini coefficient's pretty happy, right? I mean, you can imagine it's not like when civilization was, the maximum of civilization was at that point. It's not like people were just sad because they weren't like us. So that kind of intuitively makes sense. But where there are large wealth gaps, where there's a large like there's a very large wealth gap between people very immediately near each other. In that community, the Gini coefficients are very low. So it's relative wealth that dictates happiness in terms of financial happiness.
Right. Oh, and that kind of makes sense because we always like to compare ourselves to people around us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're very comparative. It's our social nature, right?
Sure. Yeah. I think that's probably pretty accurate. It's just funny to me that we use financial success as such like it's funny how much we connect financial success to happiness.
Yeah.
Even when we are like doing relatively well off, but if other people around us are like doing substantially better than us, we can't help ourselves but feel bad. It's just like even if
jealousy.
Yeah, it seems so like counterproductive, right?
Yeah, it's a fortunate aspect of human nature. But that's kind of the way humans are. I mean, I think these are pretty solid studies that have been done in multiple. I mean, they use middle class areas in Canada and the United States. They use places in the third world, places where even in like very poor areas of Africa, they've done these studies, and it's been pretty. The thing about the Gini coefficients has been pretty solid, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I think I just was trying to I wanted to hear a little more because whenever we talk, it's like it's not like a smooth conversation, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's very much chat.
So yeah, if you ever want to chat about something, I can just pull you into the channel, or this one's an open channel anyway. So
yeah.
Yeah. So wait. I was trying to think. There was something else I had wanted to ask you about, something you said earlier.
Was it about the SAT stuff?
Yeah, I feel like we actually didn't really end up finishing that because we got sidetracked, or we pivoted to something else. Let me look. I'm trying to look back.
Was it about the intelligence aspects of SAT?
Yeah. So like the idea is this, right? So you're saying that financial success is highly correlated with intelligence in the technical sense, and SATs are a measure of intelligence. So therefore, SAT scores would technically be a potential measure for financial success.
Essentially, yes, but there's a lot of nuance. There's more nuance to that idea, because the SAT is to some degree gameable. You can retake it, which is not something you can retake it with improved scores, which is not an element of an IQ test, because IQ tests are supposed to be as biologically determined as possible. It's supposed to measure your IQ. It's not supposed to.
So an IQ test is simply a measurement of your base intelligence that is meant to measure something that is completely based off of your predisposition.
It's meant to measure IQ. Yeah, it's meant to measure IQ, and your IQ is a biological, the aspect is an aspect of you that's biological. So it's if the IQ test is something you can improve your score with after repeated attempts, then it's not a good IQ test. So the SAT, to an extent, is not a good IQ test, and it also has things that are general knowledge tests, which is not really IQ. Knowledge is something you acquire, to experience, right?
Right.
So, if you're being tested on, literature, for example, like the human condition, understanding what the author is saying, it's something you might need a pattern for recognizing. You need to have seen the pattern a lot in order to recognize it. So there's definitely some aspects of the SAT that's not an IQ test. But the math section, for instance, that's math is like as close as to an IQ test as you can get. I mean,
Well, so the
reason
funny
IQ
thing
tests are not
is,
fully- Mhm.
is that like if you really think about it, so the only really way to know how much of a test would really be based off of nature would be to somehow, because I mean, like, imagine the most extreme scenario where you have a person who like a child who's raised in such a way where you're minimizing the nurture aspect, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think, I mean, just intuitively, like, I wouldn't imagine a child who's raised like with no education would be able to do
No, yeah,
an
you
essay,
need
like
to
any test
put
at all.
in effort to make sure that they're developed properly. If you don't give them a child vital development and even like physical like nutrition that they need to grow, then their IQ will not be as high as, or let's say, yeah, it will not be as high as their biological potential would have given them. Because basically, if you don't, if a child's in very poor conditions and they don't have education, they're not, developed, they're not stimulated as a child, then they're going to be worse off in the future.
Right.
Which makes sense.
Yeah. That makes sense, but it seems to me that it just seems very difficult to really ever get to the bottom of what it, like, even with like monozygotic twin studies where you have two twins who are separated at birth. These kind of things don't even give us like perfect representations of what it means to be nature versus nurture. Like, even these are pretty inconclusive, these studies. So
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason they're inconclusive is because, again, like, so I said IQ correlation is like 0.6, which is one of the highest correlations. I think it might be the highest correlation a social study, like a social or psychology study, has ever come across in terms of phenomenon, which makes like if you don't believe in IQ, then you don't believe in all of psychology, basically, because like not only that, like psychology, like the foundations of IQ is the foundations of how all psychological studies are. Sure. Anyways, so the correlation's like 0.5, 0.6. The next highest thing that correlates with long-term economic success is conscientiousness. Like, it's still one of the big 5 personality traits, and we measure that on like a scale. I think it's like a 10-point scale. So that's the second highest thing. That's like a 0.2, 0.3. And then the rest of the things, if you add up all of the things, the variance is only 30%, which leaves 70% of what causes essentially your long-term economic success unknown, or and that could be like like specific conditions to where you grow up, economic conditions, all things like that, right?
sure.
So the reason a study like that might be inconclusive, like you mentioned, is because, well, most of what the outcome is going to be things we'd have no way of measuring or have no idea even exist. It's like completely uncharted territory if you think about it. So you're never going to get like a constant outcome from multiple studies, because if you assume there is a constant thing that correlates among them, we have yet to find something that accounts for more than 50% of that, whatever is causing that constancy, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense.
Yeah.
How do you? I'm curious. Like, you're very informed on this sort of a topic, and I'm curious as like what's the motivation behind that? Like, is that something you just are interested in general? Is that just something that you stumbled upon? And
I just stumbled upon it, and it was super interesting, and then I binged a bunch of university lectures by Mr. Peterson, and then I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. Because I used to not know a lot about so-called soft sciences. I mean, I enjoyed biology class, and really everything like biology and more fundamental has been like what I've sort of known about. But then I found psychology, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool.
Psychology is an interesting one, because sometimes with some things in psychology, it can feel a little like I don't know. It feels like there's a lot of leeway that you have to grant certain things with certain things in psychology, and especially things like sociology. Like human behavior is so complicated that it feels very rough to try and say anything like any hard and fast rules about it, as opposed to a science like it's like physics is like the kind of the opposite of that, where it's like these rules are the rules and like there's no way around, there's no like ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah, exactly. I think on that point, IQ is, because it's been studied for so long. It's like the quest for IQ was initially like very created by the military because they needed a way of assessing operational success. And I think, I don't know, it was sometime around the 1930s. And that essentially created the field of psychology as a science in the scientific sense, like having studies for this. So it takes a really long time. Essentially what I'm trying to say is that it takes a really long time before you can say something definitive in psychology. IQ is one of the few things that has been around. Personality is another one that's been around for long. You need a lot of psychometrics, which is basically like doing hardcore statistical analysis on thousands and thousands of questions and studies and stuff. And you need to have a lot of data before you can really say something definitively in psychology, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I always sort of take psychology with a little bit of a grain of salt because it's so complicated.
Yeah,
it's because like the underlying, it's like you can never, it's almost just from like a scientific like methodology approach, it's almost impossible to control all variables when you study certain things in psychology, right? Whereas with other kinds of sciences, we can usually control most variables like pretty well, and so our studies are relatively.
Yeah, I mean, we do account for that. Like I said, like we only know 30% of the variance, right? So that's kind of a metric of like how much importance you should place on IQ. It's like it's of all the things you could place importance on. Yeah, it's the most. That's the most important thing you should place, or that's the place where you should place the most importance. But in terms of the absolutely how much you value it, it's only 30% of the story, right? So it gives you a way of saying, well, like it's important, but like it's not end all be all. So, look beyond this stuff.
Yeah, right? And I think a lot of people, it's funny because it's such a contentious topic.
Yeah.
Very contentious, right? It's probably the most contentious. You can't, if you start talking about, well, it gets contentious, especially when people start connecting. And one of the biggest issues is that science has always, not always, but here and there throughout history has been pretty bad at differentiating between like what the science says and how to apply that to the real world, right?
Yeah.
So that's where things get really dicey. Like people don't like to see crazy prescriptive crazy prescriptions from these kinds of sciences. Like people are pretty okay with like prescriptions from sciences like chemistry and physics and biology to an extent. Although when you start getting into like, evolution, people get really weird about it. But then when you get into psychology and sociology, then it gets even weirder and a little more. People push back on it kind of hard.
Yeah, people do.
And I think it makes sense. Like you don't want, because in the past, there's been a lot of crazy stuff like, eugenics and all these different things that people will take science and
you can never underestimate caution, right?
Yeah. It's just people, and I think the problem is people don't understand the difference between a descriptive claim and a prescriptive claim.
Yes. Very much. I agree with that.
Yeah, and that just becomes, and I think, and then there's the whole dog whistling thing, right? You can say something you can be like, well, I'm just stating a fact, but like everyone who you care to know knows what you're really doing, right?
Yeah, that does also occur.
So I think that's probably why there can be a lot of pushback on it.
Mm-hmm. I will say though, I think psychology generally, it's a very much case by case thing. So some people push back too much. Some people will go, just be, like dogmatic about it too much. But I think on the large part, society doesn't understand psychological I don't know, I'll call them truths, but let's say scientifically generated facts enough. I think personality, like IQ is something that's important to know, but it's like in terms of usefulness, personality is probably more useful for people in society to know, because it allows you to, because like with IQ it's kind of like, all right, here's what you got. That's the sort of deal about IQ. With personality, it's like, here's what you got, but there are ways you can sort of go around that and use that to your advantage, and cover your shortcomings and make you make your life easier. And I think that's important for some people, because sometimes your problem is just that you don't understand what type of person you are, psychologically speaking, and in personality. And if you can understand that, then a lot of your people's problems might in life just might be able to be addressed.
Potentially. I don't disagree with you. I think that is a good thing. I think the issue could arise with the idea of like, people might not agree that psychology. So when you start talking about the way you are, that is a very sensitive, right? People get very attached. Don't like that term. Well, yeah, and because people are attached to the way they are, like, because when you start, there's something about like making claims about the way someone is, like telling someone that, well, this could be the way you are. People get really they push back on that.
Yeah.
A lot. It feels like you're attacking them or something.
Yeah, I've definitely had an experience with my own parents, actually. I was talking about this very specific topic of IQ with them, and they were like, I think now that they just thought I was making an opinion claim, and I was just bringing up science, I was just trying to say, but like it's just such a contentious topic. It's like people think you're trying to sort of define them with a motive, right?
So the pushback is because, wait, so you say something and someone misinterprets it as you trying to make an opinion-based claim rather than what?
Yeah, like I had people think that I think your ability to do well in math makes you more of a valuable person. So, I don't think value has anything to do with like intelligence. I'm just saying that it's something you should be aware of when you're, if you want to understand how you're going to succeed in the, in the job market and the economy. It's an important, metric, right?
So it's kind of like it's almost like if you were to advise if you were to say like, hey, I noticed that you're like 5'2". I mean, basketball's probably not the best choice for you. I mean, you could try it. It just, based on what we know about the sport and what we know about the people that are successful at the sport, might not be the best choice for you. Right. Yeah. But then when you start going into more like quote unquote abstract, or traits that are not as like, that feel, people feel like certain traits and characteristics are more sensitive, right? They're like, I don't know exactly what it is, but certain traits, like if you say someone, hey, you're not very tall, you probably shouldn't play basketball, people don't really get too offended by that. I mean, maybe, but not usually. But if you say, hey, you probably don't have the best intelligence in the technical sense, right? Like intelligence meaning like, oh, maybe your processing of information is a little bit slower than what like another person would do. You might not be successful in this like career. That's like, but then that starts to feel like an attack.
I mean, that almost feels like a very personal attack. Like you're not like, if you say it, a person could easily like parse that into their mind as as them calling you stupid, right? Like, and that's a personal attack, right? Oh, you're stupid, you're incapable. That is very frequent. The funny thing is, I mentioned how my parents are, we had that discussion. When I was doing my college app, I was, talking to my dad about math. This was not an argument. We were just talking about like what I wanted to major in, right? And I like math, right? I really like math. I applied for physics and engineering mainly, but I think I did some math minors. I mainly applied physics. I didn't apply math, even though I really like math, because my dad told me that math is something that you have to be, and just in his experience, it's something that you have to be born with. It's a gift. It's like, because I've seen people try and they really love math, but they just can't. They enter their math program, and it's just full, and it's really just a matter of, do you have it? It's like like math, you got to be full, not Einstein's, because Einstein was like the top of the top, but like you got to be like in math is lives on people who are like that. And so I'm like, so I said, okay, even though I like math, he's probably right because this is in his experience. And so I decided not to apply to math. I decided to apply to physics, which is, kind of like that, but there's a little more, freedom in that. I don't know. I don't know the right word right now, but you understand what I'm saying? It's like
So the difference
I
between
had
math
to take
and
that.
the difference between math and physics to you feels like you'd be. I guess I'm actually not 100% sure what you mean by that.
I'm just saying, as an example, like I had to sort of like accept that, like it's a you have to sort of be that genius level of a person to succeed as a math major, and
Sure.
it's a very competitive place. And that was something it's similar to what we're talking about, having to accept these sort of facts that might be hard. Like it was like it wasn't hard for me. It wasn't like I pushed back against them, but it was hard for me in the sense that like, well, I want to do math, and I was thinking about it for like weeks and weeks, and I'm like, but like, I mean, what my dad said is probably true, right? I'm like, I can't get around that fact, so I decided to pick physics instead. So it's like there's these things in society, like where we're told these things, and we have to, even if they're hard to accept, we have to accept them sometimes. This is kind of what we were talking about, right?
Yeah, I think to an extent, yeah. But it's weird because I don't know exactly how. It just makes it harder in a sense of like, because like the problem with that sort of line of thinking is that you could take it to sort of like some weird like hypothetical world where it's like some
like eugenics sort of selected.
Almost, but also like, well, you know what we should do? We just figure out what everyone's good at, and then that's the job they do, regardless of what they want to do. Like, and that sort of impinges on people's like freedom of choice, and so it's like, okay, just because I'm not like the most intuitive at math, does that mean that I shouldn't do it? No, but
no,
it might feel like you're telling somebody they shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, all my dad was saying to me is that it'll be a hard path. Actually, I would say in the case of math, it's at that point where it might be a sort of possible versus impossible point, but in like that's like a very specific, like a theoretical mathematics. That's a very specific like thing. Everything else than that, it's like it's more of a case of it's a harder, easier journey. You can choose a hard journey if you want. It's fine, right?
Yeah, it's up to you, right? It's your decision. You can choose the path of least resistance, or you can choose a path that's harder. But if you really care for it, like, and you want to do it, no one's telling you that you can't do it. It's just like, hey, just so you know, it might be a little tricky. You have to put in some work.
You know me, Mr. Jones. If there's one statement I disagree with, it's to each according to his ability, to each according to their needs.
That's That's the statement that you disagree with most.
Yeah. That is a statement I disagree with. That's Karl Marx, right? To each according to his ability.
Right, but yeah. Well, okay.
It's like
I didn't want to bring up socialism, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just making a joke. Here's an interesting fact. So studies have shown that in terms of mathematics, men and women are essentially equal in their capabilities. There's like some sort of debate where there might be an edge, but like it's really inconclusive in terms of like the very, very highest of mathematical realms of stats, like high mathematics. But for the most part, it's like almost 99% of the way through. It's like 50-50. But females, when if you just look at females as their ability to do mathematics, so there's variance, and as you go up the distribution.
I think the word female is considered not so great to use.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think from my understanding, the word female feels very scientific and very like.
Well, I'm talking about science, right?
Sure.
I don't know. Okay.
I'm just saying. People. I know that gets. I guess if you're talking about it in a scientific sense, but you probably wouldn't want to call somebody like a female.
Okay. Thanks for the heads up.
I think woman is the preferred term when you're talking about humans.
All right. Sure.
Yeah.
So if you go up the distribution of women who are, because mathematical ability has some variation as you go up the distribution within women, the study of women. Verbal and vocal skills also correlate with that in terms of like reasoning comprehension, whereas in males or men they don't, which means that women have more options at the higher end of the distribution, which accounts for a difference in interest because even if there could be an interest split of 33% could be whatever interest division, but there's an interest split. So just because someone is good at something, I think it's still within their right to pursue other interests, and that's generally what the studies have shown that to occur. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. I think we had to just be. I think most of the pushback is people thinking that when you are making descriptive claims, you are sort of subconsciously or something making descriptive claims. Like you're saying, this is what we know. This is based off of the studies and the science that we've seen. This is what we know, but it doesn't necessarily mean this. Therefore, this is what we should do.
Yeah.
Which is tricky because then the question was like, well, what's the point of even knowing something? Like, isn't the point of knowledge to figure out what to do?
That's true. Yeah, I mean.
So it gets weird.
Yeah, I mean, but so the way the standpoint I have on that is that first of all, just always know the knowledge, regardless of your opinion. The knowledge just should come first, right? Like, so the facts are the facts. That's where we should start, and then your opinion should take in those facts into account. So I don't think you really should be tacking on prescriptions with information.
Yeah,
like,
the prescription is where things get a little weird.
I think that's for people for their own decide. I mean, I think it's also valid for someone to generally make a prescription, but like I don't think it's valid that everyone has to accept their prescription. Like it should be very easy to differentiate between a course of action and just what is the information.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people get worried about the dog whistle of it all.
Yeah.
Right. It's because like anyone can just say like, well, I'm just saying. I mean, it's something that a lot of people do. Like it happens. Like people say things that are prescriptive and they're just I'm just stating what happened. It's like a classic. It's weird. It's weird that it happens, but it's such a childish move too, in a way. When you say something, knowing full well what you mean, but you're like, well, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
And people don't like that, and I don't like it either. And I think it's just we have to be very careful to not conflate those two things. Yeah. And you want to be very careful to not come across as that. But I don't think you do. I think you're very careful with how you speak. I think you're very you understand the stuff, and you're very sensitive to the negative repercussions of some of the things that might come from that information.
Yeah. Here's something that I think I might have told you this one. Here's something, and this is politically speaking, we neither side has really addressed this problem in society. And I learned about this from watching Jordan Peterson's lecture on this subject. Is that people of I think it's less than 80 something. I talked about this before actually. Yeah, they have a very hard time finding jobs in a job market because IQ, practically speaking, it is it basically is your ability to learn new skills and then repeat those skills indefinitely and learn to develop those skills. Like it's being able to do skilled work in some sort of form that correlates with IQ. And people who have IQ below a threshold, it's around 80, I think, have a very hard time doing that. And we don't have a way of addressing that in our society that either political side has come up with, because conservatives will say that all you have to do is work hard, just work hard enough, and you'll succeed. And that's not true. That's not the case for these people. And then the left-leaning people will say, liberal people will say, well, everyone's essentially the same, and you can be taught anything, right?
Well, those are like two. Those are like the two.
Yeah, these are extremes. Yeah, but like
the extreme memes of the left and right.
Yeah, but like it. I would say politically speaking, if you look at our politicians, those are the stances that are taken, and politicians govern our policies. That's really what I'm saying. So in terms of the people who are behind our policies, those are really the two stances. Are that either you can be taught everything, and there's really no variation amongst people, and that's wrong. And there's the idea that for every single person, all they have to do is work hard, and everything will be fine. And that's also wrong. So we have no way of addressing these people, and these people, they have very hard lives. They've been documented. It's been documented. It's really sad, actually.
Right. And
so
IQ
is a very sad topic because of that fact. It's like so many people struggle daily. Like it's here. Let me walk you through how this was determined. So the military, who really needs, who generally speaking feels like they are lacking enlistment. They generally are looking to recruit more men, more people, right? They're generally looking to have more numbers of people who enlist in the military. And the United States military concluded that anyone below 80%, I forget, not 80%, I forget the exact number, it's around 80, but you're not allowed to enlist in the military. You're not allowed to join the military if you have an IQ of less than a certain threshold.
Wait, that's not true?
Yeah, that's true.
Wait, so they literally will test your IQ, and then if you don't pass a certain threshold, like you're banned from the military, or no?
Yeah, and the reason is because despite their every need to have more people, right? It's in their interest to take as many people as possible. The bias works against this claim here for the military. It's in they really if the military were to lie on this subject, they'd do something that would allow them to recruit more people where they really shouldn't be recruiting, right? If there's going to be any bias, but this is the exact opposite. They concluded that it's absolutely impossible for anyone with an IQ of less than that threshold to do anything that isn't absolutely counterproductive.
Wait. Hold on. So you're saying this is the military's assessment? They came up with the assessment that anyone with an IQ of 80 or less is literally going to be a drain on them in terms of
a waste of resources and counterproductive to the goals of the military operation. Because they concluded that it's impossible to teach them anything that they can do successfully, and it's impossible for them to do anything productive for the military, right?
So they can't do anything productive. So
it's hard for them to learn skills. It's hard for them to learn new skills and to remember and to do those skills, even menial tasks, repeatedly.
Okay.
So, you might say what percent of the population is that? It's 10 to 15%. That's a lot of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have, that's 10 to 50% of our population that we have no way of addressing and no conversation about helping. And they have, I would say, of all the, we talk about groups a lot in our modern day about, different groups and how well I would say that that group of people probably has it the worst within the nation of America, meaning if you sort of factor for abject poverty, right? And health conditions, right? So I'm sort of including that. If you say if you control for that, those people probably have it the worst, because it's hard for them to just find a job, which you need to support yourself. It's hard for them to just engage socially in certain ways, because you need to be able to do a lot of having social relations is a very complicated function, right?
Sure.
So it's hard. Their lives are very, very hard.
Yeah, being socially adept is probably harder than doing a lot of technical problems.
Yeah, I mean, you can an accountant, right? I mean, it's not like that job's easy, but there's a certain menial aspect. Even if you need mathematics, there's a certain menial aspect of you do this first and then you add these numbers, right? But social ties can be very, very much more complex, and it's hard for people like those to have lives as we normally think of life is.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna say they have the hardest lives because there are people who are literally starving and dying all the time in countries.
Sure, it's
right?
all relative.
At
You're
their
talking about the
poverty.
U.S.
But like, yeah, but I'm saying like I was about to say they have the hardest life, but then I remembered, yeah, those people. You have those people who are in horrible.
then you
like,
then you
horrible
remembered the
conditions.
other like 90% of the world.
Yeah. So I changed my, but like even, those people even exist in there, and problems actually probably a larger percent there because they don't have the nutrition. So even within that.
Yeah, but I would also
Right.
imagine that if like IQ is not actually that important in certain places of the world.
That's true. Yeah, you're actually
Like,
that's correct.
you know what I
Like,
mean?
the more technology you develop, the more reliant on IQ your economy and your that makes sense.
Yeah, so I feel like IQ is something that's only really valued in very developed places because you start to get more and more technical and more like
Exactly, yeah.
like things get advanced,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's always an issue. Like you're always going to have people who are just for one reason or another are just not going to fit very well into the structure of that society. And so the question is always, and this is the whole point of like having or it should be the point. One of the points of like politics and government is to figure out and come up with prescriptive claims about what to do about something like that. And that's always hard.
Based on science. But we're not having a conversation about that at all, and it's kind of sad.
Well, because it's a hard conversation to have.
It is definitely a hard conversation, but it's like it might be hard for some people, but it's harder for other people to live those lives, in my opinion. Right? Like it might be hard to talk about IQ if it's something you don't believe in, but like I don't know, those people's lives for me feel like we should put aside that sort of. It's almost like superstition is hurting. Our superstition is hurting like actual people's lives. It's almost like people don't believe in the coronavirus, and then they take irresponsible actions and people. It's like the same thing.
Yeah. I think I think most of the problems in most of the disagreement is at a deeper level than what people think they're disagreeing about. Like, and they just no one ever has a conversation that's nuanced and like long enough to drill down to really like figure out where the disagreement is. And social media does not help that, obviously.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, dude, good stuff.
Yeah.
I always like talking to you. You've got I feel like you have good points. Good points, dude. But it's getting late for me, so I'm gonna call it a night here.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, anytime you want to pop on and chat about something, feel free to jump in.
I've just been like busy with college.
Yeah,
I think
I
my
hear you.
load is sort of decreasing now though, so I might tune into more streams now.
Yeah, totally. One thing I would just recommend is I know you probably don't have a lot of time, but like try and maybe potentially broaden your sources. I know that Jordan Peterson's somebody you listen to a lot, but one thing that's good is to hear multiple perspectives, just so you can hear different takes, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, dude. All right, good luck with college apps, man.
All right.
Talk to you later.
Talk to you later.
All right, everybody. I think call it a night on the stream. I will see you later. Actually, I'm just going to finish up this one last thing. Just getting one more villager in here. Something weird is happening with these villagers. They're like not aligning correctly. See, they're not in their beds the way they should be. Oh, wait, there they go. Oh, they wake up when some creatures are... Oh, okay, got it. Oh, why, bro? Oh, there you go. Go to sleep. I wonder if there's something wrong with this bed, which is why they're not sleeping. Oh, is the bed not accessible? Is it facing the wrong way? Oh, now I see what happened. This bed is not oriented correctly. I wonder why this whole thing has been messing up since the start. Oh, shit. Got my bed. Jesus Christ, dude. Jesus. So annoying. How do I place this properly? Oops. String over, string over. Wait, that one's facing the wrong way too, but yet it's still working? I think you need a block to be under. Maybe. I mean, to place it maybe. But I just don't understand why it... why it wasn't working in the first place. I thought it was facing the wrong direction, but I guess not. So I suppose... Now it just doesn't want to... Why doesn't it want to go there? Oh, there we go. Is that right, though? Actually got to go double check. Oh. You look at another setup. I think like this one's got 3. All the heads of the bed are facing towards the middle, and then there's... I don't think it should really matter, though, ultimately, right? I feel like that should be fine. I don't know. We'll see. I'm gonna leave it like that and see if it works. If not, I'll try and fix it tomorrow. I think that's as good as I can do for now. We'll see. All right. I'm out. Good night. Later, Darsh.